Surprise! We're working on the YJ again. That's right. More trail prep, spring maintenance, whatever you want to call it, on the YJ on this episode of RICO'S Garage. Today we're going to address an issue that came up in the first video on this YJ. Some of you may have noticed on that video when we have it sitting there running and it dies, you see a little puff of steam come up from this side of the engine bay. What that is, this vaporizer for the LP system, because this Jeep runs on LP or propane, whichever you want to call it. And how this setup works is the propane comes from the tanks in the back through a line down along the frame to this electric solenoid valve. All this is just a fancy way to turn the gas on and off. That's turned on. The liquid propane, it's liquid as it comes out of the tank, I didn't mention that, it's liquid, will come from this valve into this piece of equipment here. How this works in the Reader's Digest condensed layman's term version, basically the propane is a liquid when it comes in here, and it's a vapor when it goes into the mixer. The mixer works essentially just like a carburetor. How that takes place is liquid in, and this bottom piece of this vaporizer is heated up by the engine coolant. And there's a flapper valve in here that works off the demand all through vacuum. That basically lets the liquid propane get sprayed into this aluminum body that's heated up by the engine coolant. And then when it's sprayed, it converts from a liquid to a gas and then into the mixer and makes horsepowers and makes Rico happy. There's a rubber gasket here that's pretty much degraded. I mean, coolant is dripping out of it just with me playing with it. That's what you saw in the video. When this engine's cold and the thermostat's not opened up, it builds up pressure inside this vaporizer and makes that gasket leak onto the header and smells really bad and causes the steam that you saw. So we're going to go ahead and fix that. How are we going to fix that, you may ask? Well, let's journey over to the table. Here we have the parts that we're going to use to address this problem. Through Nash Fuel eBay store, they're out of Kentucky, they sell a repair kit for this Impco Model E vaporizer. It's essentially every part in there except for the case. It's got the new flapper valves, all the gaskets, a sponge. Also, through Impco's website, you can download the manual for this or any other Impco part that you need. The solenoid valve, the vacuum lock-off, the mixer, it's all on there. I just downloaded the Model E regulator paperwork. Regulator, vaporizer, whichever you want to call it. In this instructions, they say that as long as the unit's been in service regularly, which ours has, you can get away with just replacing the part that's bad. This stuff doesn't wear out unless it's been sitting on a shelf or the unit's been out of service for a while. So what we're going to do is just take the bottom section off. As you can see in here, this number 21 is our gasket that's leaking. So we're going to take this cover off and we're going to leave this heat exchanger in place against the body. We're not going to go up any farther than that. We're just going to take this heat exchanger off, replace this gasket, and go from there. As you can see, our regulator vaporizer is hard plumbed with black iron pipe into the mixer. So we're going to pull the mixer and the regulator and everything off all in one unit and build it on the bench. So while I have it apart, I'm going to take this opportunity to install a 1-inch carburetor spacer. A lot of things going on right now in the magazine world and on Motor Trend On Demand's Engine Master show with Freiberger and Dulcich. Also Horsepower TV, if you follow that. All these guys are saying the same thing, that you can get real good results with a 1-inch carburetor spacer on a dual plane intake. They are saying that when you're doing it in a carbureted application, that you have to increase your jet sizes because it'll lean it out. This engine runs a little on the rich side, no matter how much I adjust it. So I'm going to hope that not only the little bit of horsepower and torque gain that we get with the spacer, also going to maybe bring the fuel level a little more tolerable. Not fuel level, fuel ratio, air fuel mixture. That's what I want. Air fuel mixture into a little more acceptable range. Also going to replace the air filter because ours is trashed, as you can see. So there's not a lot of parts. This should go fairly easily, but I know propane is a mystery to a lot of people, and this appears to be a common problem with what I've read on the internet. That gasket leaking, mostly due to antifreeze contamination, which I'll admit this Jeep's had this problem. It tends to overheat. It's 60 over. I got the timing really far advanced. So when you push it and you run it hard, it tends to overheat, and then that often leads to whatever water you can find gets thrown in here. It doesn't always have the right antifreeze water mix in it. So there's probably going to be some corrosion in there that's led to the failure of the gasket. But that's enough of me rambling. Let's get this thing apart. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is fire this thing up and then go to the back and turn the tank valve off while it's running and let this thing run completely out of propane. That'll empty this line as well as this line past the valve, because just simply shutting it off and then letting this line run out, there's a chance this valve could leak a little bit and let some propane out of this line. So I'm just going to be safe rather than sorry, and we'll run it out of propane. We know we're completely out of propane. You can unhook this line. We'll pull these off, and then we'll start taking the mixer loose. Aftermarket studs I have in here are pretty long, and before I clean all that up and get the gaskets and whatnot, I'm just going to do a test fit on that spacer. You can see our manifold is just a typical poly square flange, and yes, we've got plenty of stud to use with the 1-inch spacer. Good deal. We'll clean that up, install that when the time comes. Here's the bottom of our mixer, as well as the bottom of our regulator. As you can see, she's leaking pretty bad. There's you another view of the, to show you all this is This is your mixer right here, from here up. This bottom piece is a standard Holley 1850 base plate. Bolts right to it. You can also install a quadrajet base plate onto this same mixer. Bolts right on, goes on your V8 application. Anything that takes a Holley square flange carburetor, or you can use the quadrajet base plate for obviously the quadrajet manifold, or the thermal quad, anything to spread bore. So, a little tip for you. Okay, let's get started with this. First we'll remove these screws going into this bottom plate of the mixer. Okay, let's remove these screws. Hopefully without... Oh boy, this is not going to be good. This is not going to go well. Let me try the impact driver. Remember the part when I said, oh yeah, this is going to be easy? Yeah, I may have just screwed the pooch. Let's see how lucky we can get. Maybe with any luck, these were just froze up in the cover. So, let's try the vice grips first. Okay, we managed to get all but this one right here out, and I got that one drilled out where I can run a tap through it and get this back together. Problem is, I've got the tap here, but I don't have any bolts, machine screws, whatever you want to call it. So that's about all I can do today. I'll go by the hardware store tomorrow after work, grab some machine screws that we need the right size. I got the tap here. I believe they're 1032s. Either way, I'll double check, take one with me for sure. But that's all we can do tonight. I'm going to go over and clean the intakes, shove some rags down in it, get that all ready to go, and continue this tomorrow. But as far as you're concerned, it'll be after the next screen transition. Catch you tomorrow. Okay, I'm back. Stopped at the hardware store after work. Got our 1024 bolts that we needed, along with some flat washers and lock washers. Went ahead and ran a tap through our one hole here, and I think I'm going to run through these just to clean the threads out. Okay, we got those tapped out. We'll grab the gasket, throw it on here. This thing's ready to go back together. Everything I've read advises against using any kind of sealer on this gasket, so they ought to know. It's their product, they made it, so we're going to put it on dry just like they said. I'll call that good. Let's go put it on. I'll put me a rag over the carburetor mounting flange overnight. I don't think we got any varmints in the new barn, but we used to have that problem in the old barn, but it never hurts to cover it up just to be safe. You can see I've already installed the carb spacer off camera. It's not exactly riveting stuff. I was wrong. Our studs are not long enough. Well, the new studs are indeed longer. No comparison there. See, this has a little turned down hex head. And that was threaded all the way. That's just enough to give us what we need. And on the bottom side, the old one's too short to thread out a little bit, so we're changing studs. Not a big deal. Yeah, I should have checked this last night, but I didn't. It was getting late. I was getting bummed about breaking the bolts off. Even though I really shouldn't be, because I managed to get them out without incident. Other than one, it drilled and tapped just fine, so. Okay, tech tip time. Whenever you're going to install studs like this, the easiest way to do it, take one nut, throw it on there a little ways, take another nut, once you get started on there, cinch the two nuts together, and use your wrench on this top nut. It'll draw down in there just fine. When you go to remove it, 2 wrenches, break everything off, it'll be just fine. Make sure that one's tight. Fuel's on. I'm going to get some soapy water and check for leaks. No bubbles. Good thing. All right. Soapy water burning off the headers. Clears. We got no leaks. Take her for a quick drive. Long story short, it's fixed. The gasket that we replaced on the vaporizer seems to have taken care of the leak. But let me explain to you how this video went from backing it out of the garage to now it's obviously me sitting at the desk talking to you on the camera. Backed it out of the garage, went to go for a ride, and it died. Opened the hood, checked the vaporizer, and it's a solid block of ice. So I come in here to grab the camera to show you that, and the camera's dead. Why was the vaporizer a block of ice, you ask? Well, as I've explained to you earlier, liquid propane goes in, which is very cold when it comes out of the tank, and then is heated up by engine coolant into vapor into the mixer. Well, we had a huge air pocket in the cooling system, so we just had liquid propane shooting onto aluminum casting with no coolant to warm it up. That can only take that for so long. Vaporizer turns into a chunk of ice. Propane essentially freezes inside the line, and we get no propane flow. So I had to thaw that out, which isn't a big deal. You just take some room temperature water, which warms it up tremendously, and bled the air out of the cooling system. All is well now. Got it up to operating temperature, took it for a drive. Everything works great. Bottom line, if I was a little bit better at this video thing, maybe had an extra battery or kept the camera charged up, you've been able to see it. Pretty much concludes the YJ for now. I'm sure we're going to break stuff, so we'll show you that. But hopefully next time you see it, it's wheeling. Thumbs up, comment, subscribe if you actually like this stuff and you want to see more of these builds. We'll see you on the trail. Later.